100 megawatts, one data center, and Michigan might be paying for it. And this is Raging Michigan Moderates.
What if I told you a single proposed building in Michigan could require enough electricity to power thousands of homes, if not tens of thousands? And most people in the state haven't even heard about it yet. And we're talking about a number that should get everyone's attention. Part of the thing we're talking about tonight is a data center development being proposed at the old McLeod Steel site in Gibraltar, Michigan. 100 megawatts. Where does that power come from? Who pays for this infrastructure? And why this story might tell us something about Michigan's future. Because the real question isn't just what's being built. It's whether Michigan is ready for what's coming next. This is Raging Michigan Moderates. Something important is happening in our state. And the strange thing about it is it's not secret. And it's definitely not because anybody hid it. It's because the story sounds technical and not what people would usually go after. There are going to be a zoning discussion, development proposal, an energy demand. That's 100 megawatts, right? But stay with me tonight, because by the end of this episode, you're going to understand how that number connects to our economy here in Michigan, the electric grid, the global energy markets, and the political decisions coming out of Lansing. And before we dive in, quick thing. If you're watching the video version, I thank you for tuning in. Subscribe, like, share, everything. We're going to be having the store up soon where you'll be able to get all the gear, anything you want. And feel free to support the show if you can at buymeacoffee.com/TMGM. All right, let's talk about Gibraltar. Let me say something that might surprise you. Most people think the biggest economic decisions in Michigan happen during elections. They don't. They happen during quiet planning meetings that most people don't hear about. To understand why this story matters, you have to picture the land itself. It's an old steel site, once represented, a heart of Michigan's industrial base, right? It made critical things, right? It had tons of workers. It made steel day and night. Families built their entire lives in this city, everything around it, right? Then obviously everything changed. The Rust Belt formed, jobs vanished, production declined, the plant closed, and then it's sat quiet for years. And some companies have bought it. They've done things. So they kind of rebuilt it a little bit. The factories of the digital age, it's when people started looking at the details of this proposal, and you kind of put all this together. It's a number circulating, 100 megawatts. Don't know, I'm sure we'll hopefully know more at the planning meeting. Now most people don't think in megawatts, but that number represents serious electricity demand. A single megawatt can power hundreds of homes depending on usage. 100 megawatts moves into industrial scale territory, which makes sense because it's a data center. But which is why it's made people start asking questions. And we should, right? Because especially if somehow we keep getting put on the hook for something as taxpayers. But where does this power come from? Can our grid even handle it? I mean, sometimes it feels like we get a windstorm that goes out, and I'm not knocking the workers or anything, but that's what it feels like sometimes. So I don't think the grid's ready myself. Will infrastructure upgrades be required? And if it does, they should be the one to pay for it, not us. But here's the part that should make you pause, people. A single industrial project, right? Just one. It can reshape how how electricity flows in the downriver area, possibly even out further. And most residents, they don't hear about it, but this actual one seems to be getting some attention. But it really won't hit home for everybody if it does go through until that construction starts, and then it becomes more than just an internet post. But let's slow down for a second and actually look at what a modern data center is from what I have been able to do, whatever. Because the phrase data center sounds harmless, but the hyperscale data centers operate like modern industrial facilities. Thousands of servers, thousands running constantly. Processing search queries, you go to Google, you go to all these sites. When you look, what is the news? It's a data center processing that. Streaming video, your Netflix, your cable, everything. Handling cloud computing. You got your files saved on iCloud or Google storage. Chances are it's at a data center, and it trains artificial intelligence models. The International Free Agency, I think, that estimates the global data centers consumed around 460 terawatt hours of electricity in 2022. And it's expanding like crazy. So that number is probably even higher by now. That's comparable to the electricity consumption of entire countries. And in the United States, here in America, data centers already account for roughly 4% of electricity demand. And that number is expected to grow as AI expands. Servers are going to produce heat. The cooling systems consume energy, and depending where some people want, they're trying to use water. This large computing clusters, they run continuously because we work continuously, which is why the electricity demand estimates for these facilities can reach massive levels. Like I was talking about, the 100 megawatts. Then you got to look at transmission capacity. You got to have the substations, you got to have generation capacity because electricity must stay balanced every second. I mean, we don't have a choice. Supply and demand must match in real time. That's not politics. That's physics. And we have to pay attention. Love my coffee. But think about this for a moment. A building full of computers could soon use more electricity than the entire neighborhood. And that's the scale of the infrastructure we're talking about. And that's kind of insane. There's and again, I don't know these as facts, these are just what's put out there, is that some of these data centers make noises that push animals out of their natural habitats. There's long-term consequences to the ecosystems in the area, and you got the Detroit Wildlife Refuge right there, so I don't know if that's a great place for one. But let's think about this for a moment. Michigan's economy is really impacted by this, right? Because these infrastructure decisions connect directly to almost everything. Our unemployment rate here is hovering right around 5%. That's not catastrophic, but that is not exactly booming either. I know people are going to go by the historical thing, but going by the last 10 years, but at the same time, the state has hundreds of thousands of job openings. So how can both things be true? Mismatch, skills mismatch, location mismatch, wage mismatch. Businesses are saying they can't find workers. Workers say they can't find jobs that pay enough. Both sides feel stuck because businesses are saying they don't have the money. The workers are saying they won't work for those wages. So how do we fix this? Michigan's economy is still really heavily tied to the big three and, subsidiaries and some other companies as well. So automotive, but the industry is changing. You got electric vehicles, even though they're scaling back production on that, which is impacting some plants. You got the battery production, which is getting scaled back up now. You've got your supply chains, these transitions create opportunity, but also, just like every other bubble is going to contract, it's going to expand, it's going to go. And that's people's lives that are involved in that. And we have to be very aware, the demand is going to shift. These workers feel these changes before economists write reports about them. And this is their lives. This isn't just a report that no, this is, you pay your bills, you feed your kids. This stuff matters. So do I have all the answers? No, but I like to give you guys the nuance. I like to give you guys a perception, because that perception for me, when I do things, helps and helps me prepare. So if you guys have an idea, hey, let's look at this. Hey, what's that? It's kind of all this, what I'm trying to do, and obviously talk about some of the news and politics that are going on. But let's kind of zoom out just a little bit, more obviously with the stuff that's going on in Iran. The energy markets are global, and prices have went up a little bit. Transportation costs are going to shift because of these wars, and our economy here in Michigan is deeply tied to manufacturing and logistics, which means globally energy shifts ripple through this state, hit global boom, because of the business that we do, and there's also another dimension. The metro area has one of the largest Middle Eastern communities in the United States, if not the largest, if I'm right, which means international events sometimes feel personal here. Families watch the news differently when relatives live overseas. It's just natural. That's why discussions about global conflict must be careful and responsible, especially, you don't know what that other person's going through, no matter their political views. Even though this show is called Raging Michigan Moderates, just try to be aware of, people's surroundings, right? And try to be a little bit, some empathy, trying to, we want to rage about our issues and we want to find balance, but we also have to recognize that people go through things that we may not understand or even, but, let's transition a little bit here. Governor Whitmer and her final State of the State address. Her speech highlighted what she felt was economic development infrastructure investment. Michigan has attracted major investment in electric vehicles, battery manufacturing, but a lot of it's gone belly up too. But how does this affect my daily life, your daily life? Because families across Michigan we're still feeling the pressure: groceries, insurance, utilities, and somehow this commission keeps raising rates for companies that are not short on money at all. Somehow there's justification. I have yet to hear a reason that makes any sense. But the voters judge the economies based on their household budgets. That's just the way it goes. But here's the thing that really drives voters crazy more than anything else. Regular citizens are expected to follow politics, but politics rarely explains itself clearly to the people paying the bills. Projects get studied for months, and it's insane. Developers analyze the land, engineers study infrastructure, regulators review filings, then you have to go over to the public hearings about it. Then everyone asks the same question: when did this start? That's not conspiracy thinking, that's human nature. People want transparency, and sometimes it feels like certain people are trying to get over on us. They want to know how decisions affect their communities are made. Let's kind of look at a little bit of the Secretary of State. That's beginning to form former Lieutenant Governor, our current Lieutenant Governor, I'm sorry, dropped out of the governor's race and now he is running for that. We really have to look at some of these things and just take a step back, right? Let's take a step back and just kind of look at the race a little bit. I believe Mike Duggan's in lead right now with John James second and Jocelyn Benson third, but depending on how you look. But last time I looked, as a one-on-one, if he was going one-on-one to either one of them, he beats them, and then he beats them in the three-way too as of right now. So, but we're going to be having a really, really, really big guest on here soon. Someone that's running for governor. I'm not announcing the name yet, but the interview is in the process of happening. And when they sit down here, we're asking real questions about nuances, right? Because we do know that a candidate may have a plan, right? Well, we all know that it's more than just their thing. They got to work with the legislature, the bureaucracy, right? So we know not everything's going to look the way that they want it to. And that's important that we understand that. It's important that we understand the nuance behind what they do and how they operate and how they think. It's that nuance that's so important. Because if you think that their very thing that they propose in a campaign is the way it's always going to happen, it's like almost next to never. So it's the nuance, right? Like if you see the sky's blue, your reaction, right? Like how do those things come about for some of these candidates? That's what we have to do and pay attention to. But let me ask you something. Why do we struggle to do that as a state, as a country, as a civilization? Let me know in the comments below. I think we're better than what we're doing. But we are definitely tired of not being told the truth. We're definitely tired of not finding things out till the last minute and things being misrepresented. Give me some feedback. Let me know. Subscribe, share, follow. Put some stuff in the comments below. Check out all our social links. Check out our other pages. Fractured Justice True Crime episodes on Thursdays, but starting next week, it'll be every Tuesday and Thursday. Then you got our main show, The Middle Ground Mike. We put content out on there Monday, Wednesday, Friday, usually 2 guest interviews a week. We usually have some pretty big guests on there. We got some even bigger ones coming up on there too. Middle Ground Mike will be who's hosting the governor candidate from Michigan. We're going to be hopefully attending an event, the Raging Michigan Moderate / Middle Ground Mike. At the end of the month, there's going to be a state senator and a governor candidate at a restaurant. We're hoping, and this is separate from before, we're hoping to attend that and check that out as well. Stay tuned, everybody. I appreciate you checking the show out. We're going to hopefully keep making more improvements and developing some better content. There is a protest going on, I believe, Monday at, where they want to put that data centers. If that hands out, we're going to try to go down there and talk to some people, see what they think, see what their thoughts are. I think it's good to find out what people are actually thinking. All right, everybody. This is Joe from the Raging Michigan Moderates. We'll see you next week.